Alright, welcome back to MGD 111 Photoshop. We are working with layers again. So we have our snowman that we've attached to the sled here, and I made a few adjustments here. You may have noticed I erased part of the bottom here and showed the interior of the sled. So I went back and undid some things and changed it. But it looks kind of fakey here, and part of the reason is if this snowman is behind the little girl here, there should probably be some shading in here. So one of the tools I want to try to use here is the hover over it, the burn tool. The burn tool darkens whatever I rub this brush on. So I have a nice big brush here, and the cool thing is when you're working in layers, it only affects the layer that we have selected here. So notice I can rub it all over her face, doesn't have any effect. But anytime I make contact with the snowman here, you can see that its belly is getting darker and darker and picking up some shadow. So that's kind of a cool thing. Part of blending photos together is creating similar lighting effects, similar focus, similar pixelization, similar grain, etc., etc. We're going to look at that in our final project in our last couple weeks of the semester here. But let's zoom out just a bit here. Now you can see it's starting to blend in a little bit more. Let's go back to our type layer here. And again, I'm going to click on the My Big Snow Day. And let's move this type down a little bit. Notice how it falls in behind the snowman. Why is that? Well, when we work with layers, they're stacked. And it's kind of interesting because certain things, like the history, the old ones start at the top and it builds down below it. When we're dealing with layers here, we start with the background and they build up on top of it. Think of the background as the base layer, and this is literally on top of it, and then this is literally on top of the next one. And of course we can change the order of the layers. If I take this type layer and just drag it literally above the other one, suddenly it's in front. I can also drag it down if I want to. Now I can't drag something behind the background. You may have noticed the background has a lock on it. That lock means that we can't move the background. It has to be the background. Now, we can modify the background if we want to, but we can't move it out of the way. So we have something that's starting to look like a fairly realistic image here. We could do a little bit more work to it. But I just kind of wanted to show you the way that we can affect just a certain layer. By the way, if we want to, we can also, if we were to select 2 layers at a time and use the Move tool, notice it moved the snowman and the text. So if you hold down the Command key when you're looking at the layers here, you can click on multiple layers and move them around together without merging them together. So that's kind of a pretty cool thing. We have to remember too that type layers remain separate in that they're editable text and they work kind of differently from other layers here. We're going to study that in an upcoming chapter here a little bit later. But anyway, that kind of gives you a sense of what we're working with here. We're going to add another layer in the next step, so hang on to this. In fact, save it, and you'll notice it might ask you if it wants to change the format to a PSD, which is Photoshop. Let's say yes. I already had one there with that name. Replace it. And it might also ask you to maximize compatibility. And what that's asking you to do is to flatten the layers of the picture. Now, at some point, we're going to have to do that. But while we're working on this and still editing it, we want to keep it flexible. So we want to make sure that we choose a format that allows us to continue to keep the layers until the time comes to merge them. So I'm going to click OK. And we're going to stop here, and we'll come back to this picture in a moment.